2016. The roll, please, Karen.
Councilman Esser?
Yes, here.
Councilman Bunch?
Here.
Councilwoman Clancy? Vice Mayor Lamar? Councilman McGuire?
Present.
Councilman Ford?
Here.
Mayor Francia?
Here, Councilwoman Clancy and Vice Mayor Lamar involved in family matters. This evening you will not be present. David, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, under public announcements, there are two. One is not to forget the July 3rd and 4th celebrations in the town and the historic core. That will be coming up here soon. And for those interested, and we'll probably still be in session at this time, but at 7:40, there will be a strawberry moon rising in the east, and I guess the next one won't happen to 2062. So those.
I'll bet I missed that one. Maybe we could have a reason.
Call to the public, Ms. Kern.
I have no speakers, Mayor.
Who would like to speak? Mr. Jensen.
Mayor, Councilman, C.W. Jensen. I live over on Galvin. I am a retired police captain, and therefore, under H.R. 218, I'm allowed to qualify with a law enforcement agency every year, and I get a federal license so I can carry in all 50 states and D.C. And so I wanted to be, aware of, can I carry a gun in a public place? So I did a little bit of research, and clearly Cave Creek has never done any of the requirements to prohibit me or any other lawfully licensed person from carrying concealed. So it was pretty simple, but then I was reading through the personnel manual, as I'm sure you all did, and under workplace violence, you have said that employees, which I agree, although you don't exempt Stein, former employees, which are American citizens, customers who are citizens, and visitors from bringing unauthorized firearms, I don't even know what unauthorized, who authorizes it, under the town's premises. So what I'm saying is it's incongruent with ARS law. There's no town ordinance, but you have this in your personnel manual. So, I mean, you're prohibiting people that can lawfully carry from doing that. And I'm wondering if maybe you want to take that paragraph out and make it, because who the hell reads the personnel manual? I guarantee you didn't write that paragraph. And I think it's really important because here's our security. They had one in Orlando. God bless those people. The guy knew the place, as we've seen. No one's going to come in that door because they're mad at the mayor. They want to shoot at somebody here. There's crazy Muslims, people, crazy rednecks, and then there's people that are mad at their wife, girlfriends, whatever, and they come to the workplace. Here's what someone, where do you think, if I wanted to come in and shoot everybody, which entrance would I come in? There's no prize. This one or that one? That one. And the reason you would know someone was coming in is that, unfortunately, Adam or his deputy would be dead. Uh-oh. Because they stand with their back towards the door. I'm saying, and this is not only just because I want to clarify it so I'm not violating any law, but I think that you should say people who are lawfully licensed to carry firearms under ARS, whatever it is, can carry here. Furthermore, I'd even do a dang press release in the wake of Orlando and said this Wild West town not only allows people to do that, but we encourage our citizens to do that lawfully and legally. I bet it'd be in the Daily Mail. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen. Call to the public is still open.
Hi, I'm Kristen Lewis, also the Vice President of Cave Creek Merchants and Events Association. We just want to let you know who won the art contest that we did for Call for Artists for Wild West Days. She is an awesome artist, Miss Austin, a local Cave Creek resident, and the days are November 2nd through November 6th. Thank you.
Thank you. The call to the public is still open. Council is going to proceed. Town manager, anything?
No, thank you.
Okay, 2 items on the consent, the cancellation of Tuesday's July 5th regular town council meeting, and the approval of the June 6th, 2016 regular council meeting minutes. Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes clearly have it. Thank you, council. With the agreement of council, I'm going to move agenda item number 2 up to number 1, since the discussion of the budget in its final stage here will probably take some time. Agenda item number 2 is council discussion and first reading of ordinance 2016-06, amending the town of Cave Creek's town code by the addition of a new title 15, chapter 156, entitled Transfer of Development Rights, as indicated in Exhibit A. Mr. Sims, anything from legal?
Mayor, this was something that Ian and a local landowner had come to us with an idea that is available under statute, but not in your code, that would allow you to implement a process whereby you could, in effect, consolidate areas, conservation areas where the public could use, in return for, in effect, transferring those development rights to another property. It's quite like what the State Land Department is proposing to you concerning them working with you concerning conservation easements out here as well. We've drafted a proposed ordinance. This is the first reading. Once we approve it, then the process would be an application would be submitted to the town together with the conservation easement that guarantees the public right to use the space. It's a way for you, the government, to create, in effect, like Spurcross Park, Ranch Park, but in a way without spending money. It allows persons who want to develop their property to pay for the space that is in the conservation area and to transfer that right to their property only within the town of Cave Creek. Do you want anything? Okay.
Council, I think my understanding is correct that if council were to give a green light to the first reading and eventually enact this, a process is still in place that when these proposals come before the town, they still go through the process.
Oh, the entire, yes, sir, Mayor. You'd have to go through planning and zoning. The statute expressly requires the notice, planning and zoning, and to you, the council. But to show you that it isn't providing for unbridled development, Ian, could you walk us through what it is that can be transferred? It was extremely limited.
Mayor, members of council, the ordinance has required since about 1998 certain requirements for landscape and undisturbed requirements for commercial properties in the town, ranging in size 1 to 2 acres, 15% landscape, 15% undisturbed, over 2 acres, 20% undisturbed would be required from commercial properties anywhere in town. What this ordinance does is allow someone to, instead of having the requirement for the undisturbed only, be able to acquire an equal amount of undisturbed land on the conservation easement on Brenner's Hill in this case. They would be able then have some flexibility to be able to do retention, a little more lot coverage, parking to coincide with that lot coverage. So a little more flexibility, but it does not take away the requirement for landscaping, and it puts the undisturbed where the town can enjoy it on the hill behind the town core.
And it does not change any zoning. No, zoning will not change at all.
No,
Correct.
that I understand. Amplify on the example, since I think everybody knows where and what Brenner's Hill is.
Yes, Brenner's Hill is behind Hogs and Horses, so that would be set aside 10 acres as a conservation easement. Any commercial property in town, be it along Carefree Highway, Cave Creek Road, in the town core, if they wished, could, in fact, through a plan, show how much undisturbed they would need with their site plan coming forward. and how much would be available on Brenner's Hill. The transaction would be a private one, but the town would be the record keeper and the council would be the one that would approve it.
Questions from council? Councilman Bunch.
Looking in here, that item H, the interjurisdictional transfers, that one kind of concerns me. Under what scenario would we be interested in an interjurisdictional transfer? Were we going to give Phoenix the benefit to develop their stuff? Well, I mean, what exactly?
Mayor, you are predictable, and as is Mr. Gilbert is here representing one of the property owners who thought of this and said, wait a minute, this doesn't work, because when you read the definition of sending and receiving, it's only within the town. But the legislature drafted the statute to say that this ordinance includes the right of a municipality at its discretion, to enter into an IGA with another municipality. My argument would be, you'd only do it volitionally. 2, you could only do it with another jurisdiction that has adopted this type of ordinance. And as you know, I work with about 70 cities and towns, and I called very few smaller cities and towns have adopted the breadth of this ordinance. Normally, what you do for transfers is within a plat or within a site plan, so that you can control how the property is transferred. This is, and you pointed out when we first talked to you about it, this is unbridled. I mean, this then says the property owner sending the right can sell it to anybody in the town. And you're right. Technically, it says you could go to another jurisdiction, but that other jurisdiction would have to have a similar ordinance. And 2, you could just say no. It's totally within your discretion. The only reason that's in there, the legislature had it as one of the requirements for the ordinance. But completely within your discretion. And if you didn't want to deal with Phoenix, you wouldn't do a deal with Phoenix.
But what you're saying is with what the legislature passed and the governor signed, that we actually have to have that included in this. Is that?
I'll read shall adopt an ordinance providing for it. The operative word shall, and there's 8 things. Run for the legislature.
I hate that word shall. Those people down there, Sam Lewis used to wear his Mickey Mouse watch when they were in session, when he was the director of prisons.
What this does, though, is it does say it's totally within your discretion. This isn't one where a property owner can come to you and say, hey, I found a piece of property in Show Low, and I want you to transfer it. You could, even if Show Low had this ordinance, you could just say no.
Yeah. All right. With the shall, I suppose I shall have to accept it.
Councilman, answer a question.
Ian, just off the top of your head, and it might not be a fair question, can you think of any other examples where this might be used? You mentioned the core and the...
Mayor, members of council, Councilman answer, no, I cannot.
Okay. But it's possible.
It's possible.
Thank you.
Okay, so no other questions from council. Mr. Gilbert?
Thank you. I'll waive my rebuttal.
Okay, we'll go to public comment. Ms. Carey?
On item number 2.
Item number 2.
Eileen Wright.
Good evening, Eileen Wright, Cave Creek resident. I think this is very difficult to understand. I don't know exactly what we're trying to accomplish here. Hopefully each of the council members will be able to explain this to us better, as in the audience, I don't understand this. But why do we need it now, is my question I would like answered. And other than hogs and horses, what are the other applications that we see this? Because the hill behind hogs and horses doesn't need to be conserved. You can't build on it. It's non-buildable because of the restrictions that come with it. And why in Section 2 in the resolution do we have that? Are we expecting a legal challenge because of this? And I just really want, the sending property is the town core. The receiving property is commercially zoned within the town limits. There have to be other examples that you can give us and explain to us more, because this really doesn't make any sense. And does it have anything to do with the State Land Department, our 4,000 acres? To me, there's a lot of questions here, and that this doesn't make a lot of sense right now. Thank you.
Ms. Carey?
Carrie Smith.
Thank you. Kerry Smith, Cave Creek resident. I prepared some notes, but they may not be completely relevant given the discussion that I just heard from the lawyer and from Mr. Kroger. But I'll use them anyway. One of the difficulties I have is comparable to Ms. Wright's. The language seems quite general, but the objectives seem quite specific. That is, the objective that's stated is quite admirable, to protect open space and maintain open space consistent with Cave Creek. The details seem confusing. Here, and as a result, unless they are clarified, I personally would urge you to reject the proposed amendment to Town Code. A transfer of development rights from the sending parcel to the receiving parcel benefits more individuals than the owners of those two parcels. It affects the adjoining parcels, and the adjoining property owners are not necessarily directly represented in the motion, in the code. Second, the transfers have direct implications for the town itself. If an area that is low density is then modified so that a higher density is allowed, that has implications for the infrastructure needed to service that area. There is no mechanism for assessing the implications of that change in infrastructure needs. As nearly as I can tell, the obligation would fall on the town to do that assessment and to figure out exactly what would be needed as part of providing the council with the information necessary to make an appropriate decision. I don't think that's appropriate. The owner of the sending parcel should pay for that. A town's development, particularly when we're talking about higher density, has to be consistent with the ability to support that density. And one of the concerns I've had in looking at this is the available water. There's no provision in the amendment, in the proposed amendment to the town court, to do an assessment of infrastructure needs, in particular water needs. The example given, I believe, was a boutique hotel that would adjoin Hogs and Horses. Well, that's a commercial use of water. Do we have the available water and infrastructure, presumably sewers, that would connect that? Who's going to do that assessment? It seems as the ordinance is written, in order for you to make an informed decision, town planning would have to do that. Again, it seems to me the costs of that should be borne by the person proposing it, who is going to gain financially from that. Last and not least, there's an amicus brief before the Supreme Court. I happen to be involved because I was asked to support it, associated with a land use change in the state of Wisconsin and the state's rulings to disallow the partitioning of adjoining parcels that would benefit from development in one way or another. And the substance of the brief, I have no direct knowledge of the law, is that this would be a taking that would restrict land use, and it's before the Supreme Court. I think that our legal counsel should look into this to make sure that the kinds of changes we're making don't put us in that kind of problem. Thank you.
Let me go through the public comment, Mr. Gilman. Does anyone else wish to speak? Mr. Jensen?
Yeah, I put down two, but it's obviously one. So I took some time out from sending harassing public records requests, and I wanted to get into the general plan 2016, but I said, you know what? I'm going to read the 2005 general plan. And this is apropos to your budget, and it's probably more of a legal question. When I prepared budgets, we had a general plan, so to speak, and we had certain goals. Your goals are, shall contribute to our unique character and diverse lifestyles, encourage tourism and development of the historic town core compatible with the town's unique heritage, shall conserve our rich, varied, self-sustaining natural environment, shall be within the carrying capacity of our land and resources, which of course is the population that can be supported indefinitely by its supporting systems. Had to look it up, actually. So, Mr. Lawyer, in our general plan, which the budget responds to the general plan, correct? To the rules of the general plan?
I think the budget responds to any number of things.
Okay, well, one of them is the general plan. So I'm curious, if these are your benchmarks, these are your values, then why is nowhere in the budget any narrative that talks about how every department is achieving your goals? And Mr. You were on, Steve was on, the Planning Commission, and Mr. Esser was. So these were the things that everybody decided were priorities, and over the last, 10 years, not once have you put a narrative in there explaining how your budget meets your values. I don't even think the budget should be discussed. It's fatally flawed inside, but also you're not doing what you're supposed to do. You're throwing numbers and no narrative. You're saying this is how much money we want to spend, but you're not saying why we need to spend it.
Public comment is still open. Okay, we're going to proceed here. Before I go to Mr. Gilbert, Ian, Brenner's Hill, could that property be developed?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gilbert.
Paul Gilbert, 701 North 44th Street, Phoenix. I was a bit precipitous in saying I didn't want to speak. I had not anticipated this public comment. I think that what you need to consider as we reason together on this new ordinance amendment is this. It's set up to work just like a zoning case. So this thing doesn't just, we go down to Ian and say, Ian, we want to do this transfer. And Ian says, oh, I think that's a wonderful idea. I'm going to sign off on it right now. That's not how it works. This has to go through the same rigorous process that a zoning case does. And I may say that I know a few communities where the zoning process is more rigorous than in this place, having a few arrows pulled out of my back at hearings out here in the past. I can tell you there will be a rigorous analysis of this. And for example, is there enough water? Well, that's clearly something that needs to be decided during the zone, I'm calling it the zoning process. So you don't make these decisions in a vacuum. The concern, for example, well, it may have a deleterious effect on the adjacent property. It's noticed just like a zoning hearing. And I suspect that the staff will require we send out notices to the adjacent property owners, and if they don't, we'll commit to do that, so that the adjacent property owners will know exactly what's going to happen. If they don't want this density transferred, they have a right to come down and protest and tell you they don't want to do it. Concomitantly, you have a right to say, we don't like it. We are concerned that there is not enough water to handle the increased density or whatever issue could come up. The bottom line is, this is not done in a vacuum. It's a full, complete, plenary public hearing where all these issues can be fully discussed and vetted, and then only after you, as recipients of all this information, will make the decision whether to allow the transfer to take place or not. So the public is protected, the city is protected. The neighbors are protected, the developer and property owner is protected. So there's built-in protections that ensure that this basically must be a win-win situation for all involved. So therefore, I would urge you to adopt this ordinance as proposed, and I think you need to be careful. We're only talking tonight about adoption of the ordinance. The specific property that this is going to affect isn't before you this evening. So in many ways, when we're talking about the specific property, we kind of got the cart before the horse, pardon my saying so. So let's just focus on what's before you this evening, which is the ordinance itself, nothing more. Then when we come in with a specific request, we can talk about the property, the merits, the pros, the cons, or whatever else. So I think this is a good opportunity for the city, and I would vigorously request that you adopt this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Anything else? Let me bring it back. Thank you. Councilman Bunch, get us started.
Move to give first reading to ordinance 2016-06, an ordinance of the mayor and town council of the town of Cave Creek, Maricopa County, Arizona, amending the town of Cave Creek Town Code by the addition of new title 15, chapter 156, entitled Transfer of Development Rights, as indicated in Exhibit A.
Second.
Motion made and second. Councilman Bunch.
This is just one more tool for the community to achieve some of the goals that have been set. I believe the same document that Mr. Jensen referenced before had a couple of properties in there that we really wanted to preserve, and I apologize to Mr. Gilbert because I'm going to bring up some specific examples. One of them was Brenner's Hill. The other was Saguaro Hill. If you like looking at the house on top of that hill and the tennis court that they had every right to put up there, rather than our preserving it, then you could have the same thing looking on Brenner's Hill. This is a tool that will allow us to preserve something that is a beautiful hillside that you can see from the main part of the town of Cave Creek, down through the historic core. And I believe, as Ian said, there's not too many other places we can even think of where this would be applicable to utilize this. So yeah, we're achieving a long-term goal, which is the preservation of that hill eventually.
Councilman Nasser, you had the second.
I agree with everything Ernie said. If I understand it, and I think I do, this is step one, as Mr. Sims has explained to us. It's a request for an ordinance to change the code to allow transfer of development rights, as simple as that. And we're not there yet. We're not even started. This is a first reading. I agree with everything Mr. Gilbert said. And as Bill said, the town attorney, we will go through the regular process. It will probably result in a development agreement or whatever. But we're not there yet. So I approve.
Councilman Ford?
Yes, my comment to this is I agree with what you both have said, and the fact that it's been made very clear that we're not going to circumvent any of our processes. I myself sat on the Planning Commission for 2 terms, and we're not circumventing any of that, so I do agree with it.
Councilman McBride.
Open space is very dear to the citizens of Cave Creek, and the consolidation of open space allows us to be more visible, allows this to represent the community better than would occur if they were small pieces of open space that were not connected. So it gives the town and the developer an option that would not be available otherwise.
To echo my fellow councilmen, it is a tool, and the word mitigation, of which I've come to learn quite a bit about dealing with the State Land Department, but now it has a local or a town application, or it may, if this ordinance moves forward. And again, that's the only thing council is considering this evening. We're not considering the project, we're considering the ordinance. But Density transfer is probably the better description, because that we know what that means. It's not a given. It's not an automatic. If a developer comes in and said, I would like to do this, I would like to trade this for that, there is a process that the developer has to go through in order to achieve that end. And it starts with the staff, then planning, then council. So there aren't any steps that are being negated or shunted or pushed aside. But what it does allow, and what it does provide the town to do, is when a project might come up where this would fit into this type of density transfer or mitigation, we therefore have the ordinance in which to make that happen. So I am going to support it. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes clearly have it. Thank you, council. Thank you, staff. On to agenda item number 1, and that would be the budget. Mr. Wellington.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Robert Wedigan, the Finance Director, and I'm going to go over a high-level kind of presentation of the tentative budget that we're proposing that you adopt this evening. So as I mess with my technical gadgets here. All right. So a budget is a plan. It's a list of priorities, a list of needs. It also determines the levels of service and types of services. It also is a list of proposed capital improvements. It's kind of a policy statement. It's a plan. It's all the above. And this is what we did to create the budget. Starting in January, department heads started preparing. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped a slide. Oops. There we go. So starting in January. That's weird. Okay.
You work very quickly.
Hands off. See that? All right. Thank you for your patience. All right. So department heads started to prepare their projections for the rest of the year's expenses, expenditures, and they started to prepare their projections for this next year. And creating a list of items that they wanted, needed, and had to have. So in March, we completed estimates and put them in spreadsheets and started to calculate how much we were going to spend or wanted to spend or needed to spend, while the Finance Department created some non-operational revenue projections. And of course, we determined the debt service expenditures and estimated what the beginning resources would be. And the department heads also helped contribute to the estimation of revenues that were directly related to their operations. In April and May, we began to review the budgets with volunteers who are also council members, and started to look at revising the budget based on restrictions that were due to revenues and the fact that the expenditures at this point had exceeded revenues. We finally honed down the budget to what you see before you, and that's the tentative budget that we're looking to adopt. Now, the tentative budget sets the expenditure limitation for the town. Of course, with council approval, the budget can be decreased and expenditure budgets moved between departments and funds. So assuming that the budget's adopted today, the final budget will be published twice in consecutive weeks and will be on the July 18th agenda for final approval. So the final budget will be adopted in July, and that's totally fine, even though the fiscal year has already started. So what we looked at in terms of formation of the budget were some national, state, and local economic trends. And it looks like from everything that we saw, that the economy will continue to improve slowly and grow slowly. We also included some recent legislative changes that impacted revenues and expenditures. We looked at CPI and how that might affect our expenditures. And then energy costs, APS provides information about what they plan to do. Personal costs actually are kind of decreasing. We made a big change in our health coverage and health provider that resulted in a significant savings. But we also did include a cost of living adjustment for employees. So major highlights that this budget represents is about $1 million in road maintenance and construction, and that's including the HERF monies as well as those that are in the general fund. And then park improvement, we're going to spend about $152,000 continuing to improve the park. And utilities, we did increase the repair and replacement maintenance just because there's kind of a pent-up demand for that in that area, and that increased significantly over last year. And then we plan to do some more financial analyzing and planning for our future rates going to be looked at, as well as our debt. And it's been a while since we systematically reviewed either one. It's been several years. It's been over 8 years probably. So 7 or 8 years for each. So it's time to do that. And let's see. So basically, this is from page 5 of the budget book that you were given. It kind of just shows how the town has transitioned from a phase of, geez, I'm not really doing anything. Sorry about that. Okay. This is not a defective end user issue here. This is equipment issue. Okay.
Just pick one.
Yeah, I'm trying. It's much more fun when it's animated, right? So this gives you back in 2009 when the town was developing the water and sewer systems, purchasing them, improving them, and then you kind of come to kind of bottoming out in 13, 14, 15, and that's kind of where we're just kind of pursuing the status quo and maintaining things and not expanding. This slide, which I hope stays on the slide here, this is from page 10, and it basically shows the budget broken down by fund type. So we have governmental funds here, we have the enterprise fund here. This is overall. So this actually is the budget amount that's being requested. The general fund represents about $5 million of that. Special revenue funds are about 1.3 million. I'm sorry. HERF is right here under there. Sewer Improvement District, Spur Cross, Conservation Area. That's the amount we're planning to spend. So these are just the amounts that were budgeted to be spent. It doesn't have anything to do with balances that might be in them or revenues that they might generate. It's just the expenditure side of things. Open space and trails, that was a leftover development impact fee money that was collected that's being spent out. Open space acquisition has a minimal budget, although the balance is quite large in there now. Grant funds, we anticipate the possibility of getting grants, but there isn't, $590,000 of that is unspecified, meaning we don't actually have a grant lined up for it, but the expenditure authority gives us the ability to pursue that grant if one becomes available. So town hall debt service, we'll still owe a little bit on this town hall. A couple more years after this next year, we'll have it all paid off. Enterprise fund, so you can see the large portion of the total expenditures are involving the enterprise fund. Okay. Most of the enterprise fund, of course, well, a lot of it is over half of it's probably debt service.
Councilman, you have a question?
I just was checking. I must have been following because the number looked different at the top than the one you have up there.
Oh.
Yeah, the one inside the book is includes transfers. So I'll fix it up so it's not including transfers in the next
I just wanted
for
to
the
confirm.
final budget. Sorry about that. So, all right. So this is the sources of funds by type: local tax, local fees. Local tax is actually going to go up a little bit. Sales tax that's not construction related is showing up to be quite strong, and it's offsetting, at least in part, the construction tax changes that were made effective January 1, 2015 that impacted our construction sales tax revenue. Local fees, we just became a lot more conservative with the numbers. Last year's numbers were a little aggressive. So most of this is dialing back. It's not really a cause for alarm. State shared revenues, this actually included a grant of about $1 million. So we didn't get that grant. That was for damage that was done partly or mostly, I guess, in the park. And that's why that declined. State shared revenue, the normal revenue that we get on a monthly or quarterly basis, that actually has gone up and is expected to go up a little bit more next year as well. Miscellaneous is like rent and interest and stuff, and we're not really noticing a change there, projecting a change. And then transfers are just resources that are swapped between funds. All right, and on the use side, you can see we kind of dialed back a little bit on each one. That was part and parcel of getting the budget to balance. So personnel costs are about the same or a little bit less. Services have gone down. Commodities, not capital, is supplies, things like that. That's gone up just a little bit. And capital, because of that increase that we saw in the utility fund, that actually has gone. I'm sorry. In the utilities, it went up. On the rest of the funds, it went down. So that's why that went down. Debt service is pretty much the same because we have a flat debt service payment each year now. We're not accumulating any more debt and or prepaying it in this year's budget for 2017. And then transfers, again, that's that swap between funds.
I have a question.
Sure.
What was the rough amount that was swept from the construction sales tax? And that affected all 91 cities and towns?
Yeah, it's hard to tell. There were some benefactors in that because as a bit of background and explanation, Councilman Esser, thank you for the question, was that the state legislature has made the tax be on the point of sale rather than where the construction actually takes place, and that's true for most what used to be considered construction work, and that impacted the town significantly. I have no way of actually knowing exactly how much, but I suspect from year to year, it's between $750,000 to $1 million potentially. It's just hard to know exactly how much.
It's a big number.
It's a big number, yeah. And in this town's case, in other jurisdictions, they use construction revenue for one-time expenditures. So if they don't realize the revenue, they don't incur the expenditure. They essentially don't need to have the money. But in a small town like this, that wasn't possible. So construction revenue was never dedicated to one-time expenditures. So it impacted us operationally. But fortunately for us, our sales tax for other non-construction related has been really strong. So that's why we haven't really felt a huge impact like we could have. So again, the tentative budget caps the total expenditures for the town for the fiscal year 2016-17. And what we're asking for is a motion this evening to adopt the proposed tentative budget for the town of $16,469,878. And that's all I have. Thank you, Council.
Okay, before I forget, when the final published document comes out, page 7, you take a look at the listing of council. You need to change Councilman Lipsky to Councilman John Ford. You got it? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Woody. Thank you. Okay, there is a public hearing on the budget. Ms. Carrick?
For this item, I have C.W. Jensen.
I guess it all rolls together with what I said before. I would find it helpful to actually have department heads, follow those 4 guidelines and explain to people, what, this year, by doing this, that, or the other thing, we increased our sales tax this much. And actually saying, last time you gave us a bunch of money, here's actually what we did with it, and here's our accomplishments, instead of just sending you a bill I just think that that's a better way to go. And a lot of the goals and objectives, like I said last year, Tigal, either in an email or whatever, the goals and objectives aren't goals and objectives. They're job duties. It would be like, anyway, you know what I'm saying. Nothing is explained, and I'm just curious if at any time anybody questioned the pay raises, or did anybody look at the 36 vehicles we have and think, I wonder if we can get a couple bucks for this? So I just like it to be kind of more of a story rather than just figures. Thank you.
Mayor and Council, I'm going to handle any of the questions the public has, but there's no merit in the budget this year. There is a cost of living adjustment. Countywide, it's 3.3%. We went by the CPI, and that's at 2%. So we're 1.3% less than the general county. We look at staffing levels all the time. We're at 38 FTEs. That hasn't changed in a number of years. We're still at the same number. Vehicles, it's a little bit of a misnomer to say 38 vehicles when we include bulldozers and rollers and trailers, which are maybe not used every day, but we use them heavily. Last two vehicles we purchased, I think one was like $3,000. The other one was less than, probably about the same price. So we do look at those things very effectively. So vehicles, insurance, we changed our group health insurance. We look at our property insurance. We make some adjustments there. So we did a lot of those things. So every year, as a budget, we go through it, myself and the department heads. And then we have, there was someone quoted that Mr. Lamar participated. He had other obligations. So we just had two counselors look at the budget, and then we present it to you folks. And I think we had at least, 3 budget workshops, I believe, during the period. And so we talked about a lot of those different topics in the budget. So I think just to answer that question is that we looked at all those items.
Okay. Thank you. Public hearing.
Kristen Lewis.
Hi again. You have charged the CCMEA this year with Cave Creek Wild West Days, and we are absolutely thrilled to coordinate this event. The confirmed dates this year are the dates this year for Wild West Days are Wednesday, November 2nd through Sunday, November 6th. The events that we have are the parade, the poker ride, Battle of the Bars bull riding, Western gunfighting through the Prescott Regulators, bathtub races, mutton bustings, Legends of the West, a bike run this year, and pig racing, among many other activities. You have challenged us to showcase the character of Cave Creek. However, without the financial support that you have historically given Wild West Days, the task is almost insurmountable. For Wild West Days 2015, the town of Cave Creek invested $46,500. Cave Creek Merchants and Events Association is excited to rise to the challenge of spearheading a successful event and challenge the zero line item of support for this event. Invest in this town, this tradition, and the history and the culture. Thank you.
Mayor and Council, Wild West Days last year versus this year are different. For one thing, we had a rodeo come in, which was new. That was pricey. You're talking about the 501c3 contributions. It's in the budget for, I believe we put, Robert tells me if I'm wrong, 20,000? Is it 10,000? I believe it's 10,000 in the budget, undeclared. So the council can assign that, whether to the museum or Wild West Days, whoever they break it up. We also did law enforcement and traffic control. We cut that in half. We cut that in half for all our events across, because trying to live within our means on the budget. That was about $7,200 last year. This year it's about $3,500 in the budget for that. So we gave consideration to all of those third-party events that we did. But in the time, looking at the whole of the town, third-party transfers were changed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Public hearing is still open, Ms. Carey.
Mark Pegler?
Sorry. Mark Pegler, 6245 East Cave Creek Road. I'm the treasurer of the Cave Creek Merchants and Events Association. And everything that Peter says is absolutely true. Everything that Kristen says is absolutely true. Historically, this is one of Cave Creek's largest events, and the $10,000 that the town has traditionally supplied for Wild West Days comes back in sales tax revenue, unless I'm completely off base, by Friday at about 9 p.m. It's back in the town's coffers using the town's current sales tax rate. And so I'm not, everything above that, we're bringing in people, we're trying to bring in people. Cave Creek is based off of, traditionally mom and pop businesses. They don't have the infrastructure to do the advertising. They don't have the budget to do the advertising. And that's what the Merchants Association is here to do, is to help bring people from the valley up here in a general sort of way to help the businesses in the commercial core. We'd like to be able to get to a point that we can do it without the town's help. That's our eventual goal. But right now, we're not there. We rely on, traditionally, we relied on Taste of Cave Creek funds. We relied on funds from Wild West Days to make us go through to the next year. Well, we haven't had the funds from Taste of Cave Creek for a few years, and we didn't have the funds from Wild West Days last year. So without that, it's going to be really dicey. That's it. Thank you.
Mayor and Council, it is in the budget for $10,000 undesignated. Technically, the budget's $22,000 in the black. So if you wanted to assign some of those funds, it cuts it narrow. You could do that. So it's available.
You are cutting that thin, Town Manager.
Very, very thin.
But before, when you mentioned about the pre-budget, the workshop meeting, if there are actually four.
Four, correct.
And I remember the first because what was being forecast as far as the budget concern was
correct.
Reddick of a couple $100,000. So before we go any further, compliments to you and the staff of getting it now to the other color ink that we prefer. And dealing, this is the council matter, in dealing with allocations to the chamber or the merchants, I'm sorry, the chamber or the museum, etc. It's always a difficult matter for council, but it's good to know that.
Well, actually, when I first got here, you had 40,000. Last year, down to 20,000. This year went down to 10. I figured if you did the same two, you'd cut them in half.
Right.
But if we are, Rob and I are very conservative in our estimates. I think rightly so for this time of year. But it's something you could look at, because if you're going to it's one thing to have them change the budget and increase that. It's another thing to spend that money. So just point of reference. So if you wanted to add 10,000 in there, but knowing when we get to a certain point in time that's not doable, you just don't do it. It's kind of what I do.
And you prefer council to do that than to request a transfer of funds from?
Yeah, we transfer. It shows it on the graphs. It's a false sense, because it shows a lot of money going back and forth, and we're just robbing Peter to pay Paul. Not particularly excited about that. The bulk of it, 95% plus, goes to utilities. So we're trying to right that ship a little bit. But like I said, it's just a false sense of security in that idea. I'd rather have you folks allocate an extra 10 or 15,000, whatever number you deem appropriate, and say, okay, we'll put it in the budget document, give you the authority to spend it. But if we actually spend it, have it go to you folks and say, can we afford to do that with revenue projections on? That's the way I would prefer to do it. Correct.
Public hearing is still open. Carrie?
I have no other speakers.
Does anyone else wish to, Mr. Smith?
Kerry Smith, Cave Creek resident again. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Two questions. The first is the numbers went by pretty quickly and I neglected to look at the budget carefully, but there was a figure for the enterprise fund. I think it was something like $9 million roughly. It would be interesting to know the comparison between that and the revenues associated with the water and wastewater accounts, so that in contrast to some of the other activities, the water and the wastewater, the enterprise account has payments that are associated with the services, and the question is, are we cross-subsidizing those activities and by how much, and how secure are we in the size of that cross-subsidy? That's the first question. The second is, I support the museum and Wild West Days greatly. I'm an economist. I've spent my life studying the economy, and I really urge caution and our town manager's caution in the budget. I think the economy is weak, despite the pronouncements from Washington, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if we were to see a downturn in economic activity. So if to the extent you can hold off in making commitments, it might be wise to do so. Thank you.
Transfers, subsidies to utilities, somewhere between 1.2 and 1.5 million every year for the last 3 years.
Public hearing is still open. Okay, let me bring this to Council. Councilman Buck, thank you.
Yeah. As I've said before through the budget cycle over the years, we could put a 747 aircraft in the budget, and if the money didn't show up, we just can't buy it. But if you don't put it in there and your money pops up and you find yourself in need of a 747, then you can't buy it because you didn't budget for it. I would, at this stage, like to see the community contract service grants go back to the previous value of 20, and hope that that money is available when the time comes, because as they said, Wild West Days, the town handled it last year, and this year we've given it to them and said, okay, here you go, here's your president, here's your gift of Wild West Days. Open the box, and the box is empty. And that's kind of scary. And the residuals from these special events, the only reason to actually do them, you get people from all over the Phoenix metropolitan area that come up here and spend money, and I believe that there's residuals when people come here and have a good time, and they turn around and they come back later and bring their winter visitors and their people who are coming to Cave Creek, because it's a neat little place to come and hang out and spend money and go home, which is the key there. I would like to see council go ahead and restore that to the previous number, and if we don't have it, we can't give it to them.
Okay, did you second?
Is there a motion?
Yeah, motion to change that back to the previous.
I'll second it.
Okay, if we could, Council, first of all, make the main motion to approve the budget, and then get into the amendments.
Well, I can probably do that if you'd like. Move to adopt the Town of Cave Creek fiscal year 2016-2017 tentative budget (parentheses adoption). The tentative budget caps the total expenditures of the fiscal year 2016-2017 budget. Following the approval of the tentative budget, expenditures could be moved within the budget or lowered, but the overall total expenditures cannot be increased.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Do you have any friendly amendments, Councilman?
Point of clarification, Mayor, if I may. I'm sorry, but it should state the dollar total.
And it's not in my copy here.
Yes, I know.
It was 16 million.
Okay. Are you holding back a couple million on us, Mr. Ryan?
Okay, that number is in the budget. The cap would be $16,469,878, and the parentheses is $19,509, including transfers, close parentheses. And my friendly amendment, we had changed that to $16,479,878, and restore the community contract service grants.
I approve the original motion as read with the amendment to the original motion, adding the financial number.
Council,
I guess we need to vote on the first one first, don't we? I got the horse ahead.
Council, we're discussing the friendly amendment, which is bumping the budget by 10 grand, basically.
Yeah.
And the reason I think that's important too is because you're right, once we set the budget, we can't go back and add something afterwards. I'd much rather say, I'm sorry, we can't do it,
Yeah.
but not have it in the budget be a bad thing.
Councilman McGuire.
I support the amendment. These are community services. In many communities, these are supported by local government. These are organizations that have a very important role in this community, and I think that's you've identified two that are very important.
Although it's not Christmas, I'm going to play Scrooge on this one, because I agree with everything that is being said, but the reality is I don't know what the economy is going to do internationally. We all know it's kind of like this. With the Wild West days, it's easier for me to justify because you're investing 10 and you're getting back more than 10, so that's a little bit easier. With the museum, they are the repository of our history. To not give them something would be like telling a child there's no Santa Claus. It's just kind of a hard thing. But I've said my piece. Let's vote on the friendly motion.
Can I ask for one thing, Mayor? Since it's the community, it's within my spending authority, but I don't want to do that because I can spend up to 25. Any of these requests, I would prefer they have to go to council. So let you folks make the decision how the money is divvied up.
Yes.
Yeah.
And know that I think the phrase is council has your back. Yes. We all know that anything under 10 you can sign off on.
25 now.
Yeah, 25.
But I prefer these.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think I speak for. We don't want your ass out on a limb.
Thank you.
On finance. Bring it to council.
That's all right.
Council do just what.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, should we add that to the amendment that these things need to come back to council? These community contract service grants.
Well, I think what Peter's saying, he's going to bring it to council.
I'm happy with this.
Don't forget.
Oh no.
Yes.
He's been to Buckeye and back.
Okay, Carrie, would you call the roll? This is on the friendly amendment. To bump the budget.
Councilman Esser?
Yes.
Councilman Bunch?
Yes.
Councilman McGuire?
Yes.
Councilman Ford?
Yes.
Mayor Francia?
Okay, yes, so that's a 5-0 vote. Okay, now we're back to the main motion on the budget itself. Any further discussion on the budget? Councilman McGuire.
Yeah. This is a lean budget, but it's also one that allows Cave Creek to pursue priorities, such as investigating the possibility of expanding open space, if that seems reasonable. I spoke for a while today with Mr. Wedigan, and he assured me that the allocations, it's not expenditures, the possible allocations are based upon strong business growth that we have seen in this community, even during the economic downturn that we saw in 08, 09. Local businesses were increasing, and that speaks well of Cave Creek. His are conservative estimates, and I believe that this is a sound budget.
Councilman Ford.
Yeah, being new, I went ahead and read this very closely, and what I'm impressed with is I know how hard it had to be to make some of these decisions, and I do believe that staff deserves to have somewhat of a raise. I think it's been way overdue. I wish it could be more, and it can't at this time. But I want to compliment you as management and finance and the whole staff, because I think this is really getting it down to the very tightest point, and yet you were able to do it, and that's very tough to do.
Thank you.
I'd kind of like to second what Councilman Ford said.
in my opinion, congratulations to our finance director. He's a CPA. It's the best budget I've ever seen. And many of the questions that were asked by you are in either the graphs or the narrative. They're in here. But you don't have that. We do. So I approve.
Councilman Bunch, last thoughts?
It's always a chore to get the budget done. And having been here when we had some of those monster ones that were up there, it was really scary back then. Leaner and meaner, and hopefully the economy stays rocking along for the next fiscal year for this period of time, and it does not come crashing down on us.
Again, starting with that first of the budget workshops, things were like, whoa, I had to take a deep breath on that one, and all of you really came around, because I know sacrifices were made when you are looking at red ink like that. It doesn't change the black just because you change your pen. You have to make cuts, you have to make...
I would say the department heads do a good job.
Okay, so thank you for that. Carrie, this is financial. The roll, please.
Councilman Bunch?
Yes.
Councilman McGuire?
Yes.
Councilman Ford?
Yes.
Councilman Esser?
Yes.
Mayor Francia?
Yes, by 5-0 vote, the motion clearly passes. Before I ask for adjournment, I believe there is a forum in here, the Sonora News is sponsoring on June the 27th.
Monday.
Of all the candidates running for council and the mayor. So it's planned to attend that. Motion to adjourn, council.
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you, council.
Are you going to write